So welcome, and again, Happy New Year from Phoenix Systems. Going to have a really interesting and a very topical topic today around ransomware, and the whole topic is around, I love the title, by the way, that Rick put together, ransomware, the landmine of the internet, and he's got some amazing content, and I think more than one conversation starter that I would suggest you all are going to have after today's conversation. And Rick has, and I and Les Hoffman from Phoenix Systems, we've been going through the conversation. It's going to be a really interesting one. And for the folks in Canada, there's a few timely things that have been going on in Canada. Most recently, we had something with Metrolinx in terms of a possible, but they avoided it in terms of cybersecurity. Maybe Rick can talk to us about that. So let's look at my time here, and I think we're right on time at 1 p.m. I just wanted to introduce a little background around Rick Rusch. And Rick has an accounting and computer programming degree. He is and has been a CPA since 1987, and he founded Secure ERP, who he's the founder of, in 1992, and he's been focusing on cybersecurity specifically since 2015. He has joined over 1,000 worldwide and like-minded IT peers in 2015. He's had daily interactions with top cybersecurity IT professionals across the country, and Rick being in the United States. And he has been speaking on cybersecurity for over 3 years. So we're very, very delighted and very excited to have Rick on with us today, and Let's Talk ERP. So Rick, welcome to our video conference series, and I really appreciate you being here. And I will hand the video mic, as we say, over to you.
Thank you, Javid. Thanks to Phoenix Systems for putting this on, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone that's attending, and hopefully this will be very informative, and get ready with your questions. So as you're going through this, load Javid up with questions. Javid wanted to quickly go over what we're going to cover, and then I think we have a polling question right off the bat. We're going to do a quick history on ransomware. What is it? I often get that question from folks that are not in IT and haven't been exposed to it. We're going to talk about some of the cautionary tales from previous victims. Hopefully recognize some of the different types of cyber protection, and then touch on the benefits of each protection type. Javid, do you want to hit the first polling question?
Yeah, so as we're launching the polling question, just a reminder for those who haven't been to a Let's Talk ERP video webinar series with Phoenix Systems, we tend to do live polling questions. So we've got about 3 or so with Rick today. So here we go, Rick. We've got people answering away. What's your goal in attending today's session? People are still answering what their goal is. We're waiting for the results to come in. Looks wow, looks interesting. I'm loving this whole live polling thing.
Now, one of the
very interesting.
When I was thinking about this earlier today, I actually thought, well, maybe I should have added one of them. Our attorneys will not allow us to answer as one of the questions, because ransomware is one of those attacks that often goes unreported and is really kept quiet for reputational purposes.
So I'm looking there now. Let's close and let's get the results and see what we get from our first polling question, Rick.
That's
there you go. Wow.
I'm actually shocked by my boss made me attend is 0. Often, some of these webinars and seminars, you get pushed into it by the upper management because they don't want to go. So I'm very heartened by that, and heartened by that they do want to do protection, because what goes with that is, after this webinar, you can't just walk away and go, well, that was nice information, what's next on the agenda? It actually takes action. And then at the end of the webinar, we're going to offer a checklist so that you can see what what protections you actually need and what you have and what you need help control that risk.
Yeah, so that checklist, folks, for those who are attending at the video webinar right now, that will be part of the follow-up communication we're going to send to everybody within a 24-hour time period. And Rick, thank you very much for providing that free checklist. So we'll have that to the attendees 24 hours right after today's session. So thanks, Rick, for that.
And really, ultimately, our goal is to help you, prevent you from being a sitting duck. And that just takes information, being informed, and taking action on that information. And this is what our checklist is going to look like. And in addition to the checklist, if you sign up for it, you also get, I do a weekly cybersecurity tip that comes in your email, and I've gotten rave reviews over those. Okay, we're going to do a second polling question.
So yeah, so here we go. Has your company been attacked by ransomware? Let's see what the polling results are. And hey, Rick, let's see how honest people are. Maybe maybe we'll get something different.
I will say any answers to this will be kept in confidence, and that's an ethical standard that I have. I've had more than one business owner that has been attacked. Now, not as a client, but as a prospect. When I have the discussion with them, they say, look, you cannot tell anybody about this. This would kill our reputation.
Of course. Let's end the polling question. Let's get the results. Here we go.
More than half have been attacked in the past. That's not surprising. That's pretty much in line with the statistics that I see on a regular basis. The don't know and the how would I know, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will know if you're being attacked by ransomware. Okay, we're going to do a quick history, and the takeaway I want to emphasize on this is that this is a business. This is not kids playing in the basement, seeing what they can do, like War Games, that 1980s movie. This is a business. It's a worldwide business, and it is big business. Now, about less than 10 years ago, that number was about 10%. So it was about 80,000 new threats every day. Now it's near 1 million every day. So this is a threat that is not going away. As you saw, more than 50% have already been attacked. But let's hit on the business aspect of it. You start out a business, and typically it's labor intensive. If you're performing a service, you have to hire people, and it takes people, it takes time, it's labor intensive, and that's typically what a breach is, because you have to have hackers or hacktivists. So but it's a good business model. It's a profitable business model. So if it's labor intensive, what is the first thing any good business book will tell you to do when you have a labor intensive, profitable business model? They tell you to automate. And that's what ransomware is. It's an automated theft of your assets. You'll see them in keyloggers to capture account information. You see botnets or drones out there. You'll hear about that. What we're going to focus on is actually the ransomware aspect of the criminal enterprise. Now, the process through which ransomware works has been around since the 80s, but not until 2013 did criminals figure out that, hey, we can use this process to basically capture somebody's data and hold it for ransom. So we first kind of saw it around 2013. It mainly hit PCs. It was a kind of a nuisance. Most of the time when we had clients that got hit with it, you know, we just wipe the computer and start over. So it was an annoyance, but not much more than that. Well, in the last couple of years, that has changed significantly. You know, 2015, Canadians were impacted with 1,600 ransomware attacks a day. 2016, that doubled. So now you had, you know, 2,200 or 3,200 infections a day. These are the known cases. Like, as I said, oftentimes these go unreported and for good reason. Ransomware has become the #1 threat on the internet. And as you see it, you know, you start to hear about it on the news, but really before this year, you really almost didn't even hear about it. You had to read about it in the newspapers, or you didn't see it on the national broadcasts. But now you're seeing it more and more, and we're going to see the impact. In 2015, $24 million. And these are U.S. dollars. This was a U.S. Review in 2015, but the numbers are similar in ratio and scope in every other country. It's every country in the world. 2016, that jumped to $1 billion. That's a huge jump. 2017, it was topped $5 billion. And by 2020, it's expected to quadruple from the $5 billion now. It's the #1 problem. And that's why we chose this for our first presentation, because it's a huge problem. Here's a governmental agency that was impacted by ransomware in late November 2016. And the takeaway, they paid $28,000 on advice from their insurance company. The takeaway here is that even though they paid the ransom, they got the data back, it took them about 5 to 6 weeks to reset everything, because their database connections all got broken and they had to manually go through and reset those. So that's pretty devastating. And this was back in July. This was an impact to a Canadian company that wished to remain anonymous. So their name was never revealed. And this information comes from their forensics company that as long as they kept the identity secret, they could actually talk about it to try to get the information out that, hey, this is a problem. The backups were also attacked, which is a tactic of the ransomware criminals, because if they can attack your data and your backups, well, now you're at their mercy. You've got to pay the ransom to get your data back. This actually started with unpatched vulnerabilities, which allowed hackers access to the network and survey the entire network and find the valuable databases that they wished to hold ransom. My guess is, from reading the article, it was their ERP system that was most vulnerable, because that's where your golden information is located. They then targeted the upper management, the top management, with a sophisticated phishing email, and that got the ransomware installed on the network. Now, according to the forensics company, if they would have had a security audit performed that would have found some of the vulnerabilities, they may have avoided this very painful attack that cost the company $425,000. We're going to do one more. This was a hospital here in Indiana that paid $55,000 in ransom. And according to the company's CEO, the reason they paid the ransom was because they had backups, but they would have lost days or weeks to restore the data, and it would have cost more than the ransom. Now, they found that no employees were at fault by clicking on the phishing email, but this was so new, this was January 11th, that I find that really hard to believe that no employees were at fault, or that that obviously they had to get in some way. Now, the big plus for them was no data was lost. But I suspect that they're still going through forensics because it is so new, and the case might not be closed on that one yet. So I can almost bet that some of the viewers are going, well, Rick, those are all big operations. We're a 5-man firm, or we're a 10-person firm. We are way too small to be attacked. Well, that's why I call these landmines, because it doesn't care if you're an individual or if you're driving a tank, you're going to set off the landmine. Now, if you're in a tank, like the company that paid $425,000, yeah, they got impacted, but not very significantly, because they're so big that it doesn't really harm them. Whereas if you're a very small company, well, you're almost at more risk, because you can't afford to be down, or you almost have to pay the ransom. And that's the problem. Here's another small company. It was here in Indianapolis. This was a 3-person company. The business owner, it was a $300 ransomware. And for ethical reasons, he said, I'm not going to pay the ransom. I'm going to restore my data. He said it took him weeks to restore his data. He must have had very very good customers that he didn't completely lose his company. And he just couldn't believe it. He goes, why am I getting targeted when they've got all these other big companies out there? Because they don't care. They don't care. It's automated. Again, it's automated, so that as many people as they can hit, the better for them. Now, there was a nationwide poll in the U.S., and they polled and found that 2/3 of the organization, which was very close to our percentage that we had, because we had close to 60% on our percentages. Well, 1 out of 3 companies paid. 9 out of 10 companies polled, they don't have a security-focused internal IT. Now, they may have had IT, but most of the IT companies that I know of, most of the IT personnel, they're busy trying to put out fires, trying to make sure that everything is running, and they really don't focus on security. And that's one of the reasons that I've really focused on it myself. The lack of employee training is a key, and vulnerabilities not being addressed timely. Again, that's a proactive issue, not what we think of IT is when we have a problem, we call them. But the addressing of the vulnerabilities, and that's not just Windows vulnerabilities, that's all vulnerabilities within the programs. Now, the one good positive in this poll is that board of directors are sitting up and they're taking notice, and they're realizing, hey, we need to address this, because this is impacting our wallets. They can't just leave it into the IT department. They have to actually address and monitor some of this risk themselves. Now, one of the questions I often get is, well, you know, we've got antivirus, aren't we protected? And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but the core antivirus that's been around, it's been around for 25 years. It's a signature-based antivirus, and the way it works is I liken it to makes and models of cars. Back 25 years ago, you had 3 new viruses a year, 4 maybe. You could recognize those in a heartbeat, block those, not a problem. Well, as we saw in one of the previous slides, now you have 800, 900,000 new makes and models of cars every single day. And until the signature virus actually sees that as a threat, it lets it through. So you're seeing failure rates of 30, 40, even 50% on some of the signature viruses until they can get updated and recognize that it's a problem. So, and then the other question I get is, well, if that's the case, why am I even being sold antivirus? Because it is better than nothing. It's a better, 40% is better than 0%. But the bottom line to all this is you have to take action. You've got to look at this. You can't stick your head in the sand like an ostrich, because you know that what that does, that leaves the rest of you exposed, and that's not good. But what does that protection look like? Well, generally it looks like layers. Now the checklist I'm going to give you is 12 important layers. We don't have the time to go through all of them, so we're going to hit the top, what I consider to be the top 3, and one of the protections that every thing kind of starts with, and then talk about something that can not eliminate your risk, but migrate that risk to a third party. My number one protection is business continuity, and some of you may hear about it as backups, backup disaster recovery. And we position ourselves to work with Datto as the business continuity protection. And if you look at the screen, the view shows all of the networks that are being backed up with Datto across the globe. They're a global company, and every one of those specks of light is a network that's being protected by Datto. Now, why do I call it business continuity instead of just calling it backup? Because if you have a backup, well, when you have a crisis or an emergency and you need to restore everything, well, you've got to stop thinking of it as disaster recovery, because what takes so much time is the recovery itself. The problem with that is that's downtime. You can't do business. Often you can't do billing. You can't, sometimes you can't even take payments because the customers will call and say, well, how much do I owe? And you don't know because you can't pull it up in your ERP system. So you have to think about minimizing your downtime. And you come up with a downtime tolerance. You know, how tolerant are you of watching your staff and your company basically sit idle while you go through this recovery process? Now, if you're going to skimp on or not skimp on something, don't skimp on your backup. It is your last defense to many, many crises, and some of those are human. Maybe an employee deletes a folder that, oops, we really need that, so we got to go through and do a restore, or somebody unplugs the server and causes a real crisis. But I list here some of the things, some of the items that should be in your current backup. If it's not, let me know, and we'll talk about it. If you don't want to talk to me, talk to your IT professional, but it needs to check all these boxes to be worthwhile and to actually work towards business continuity instead of just a backup.
So just real quick then, the slide you've got here, that is what you're suggesting. That is that a checklist by priority in terms of, okay, number one, I need to do this, image-based, like, is that how you're?
To me, they're all, I wouldn't put a priority on this. I would say it has to fit, it has to check all these boxes. If you want a true business continuity solution instead of just a backup, I mean, I can back up using Carbonite, and I make a backup. One of the problems with Carbonite is it only backs up data. Okay, if my whole server gets infected, well, now I have to have an IT guy come in and rebuild the server from scratch, and that's usually a 2 to 3 day process. Well, then I can start restoring my data and do that process. And the other instance is if something hardware-wise goes wrong with that server, well, now I've got to replace that device. So that could add a week to the recovery time. Whereas if you have a true business continuity, I can switch over to my backup appliance, and that runs my server as my server until we can get the hardware back in status.
That's good, Rick. Thanks. I just want to remind everyone that you have the ability and opportunity we will have to ask questions, and Rick will, depending on the time, try to answer as many questions as he can. If you've got questions that are starting to roll into your head as Rick is going through his presentation, please jump on and send us your question, and we will make sure that your question is answered within the time we have. So, Rick, thanks, and continue, my friend.
Okay, number 2 on my top priority list in terms of protections is user training. These posters are actually from an educational site that they allow you to download, and you can have them printed up and put in your common areas for employees to see, like the kitchen area or break area, just like OSHA posters. And the goal is to keep them constantly thinking of security. Now, we do training that is by employee. They get a certificate, they get fake emails to try and get them to see if they click on things. It's a whole constant training that we offer, but that it's very important. Oftentimes companies don't do any training. I recommend it monthly, if not, if you can't do it monthly, like a lunch and learn, at least quarterly, constantly update the users on training. And we're up to polling question number 3.
Okay, so this is the third third of the 3. So it's the last one. The question here is, what antivirus are you currently using? You've got some answers there, so answer the question, and we'll momentarily end the polling.
And the reason I'm asking this is to kind of get back to the one of the issues which I found a few years ago is I was quite concerned about the antivirus. What do we have to do to get this so that it works and protects us like it should?
All right, I think we're going to end the polling. So thank you, and here are the results.
And most of you are running the kind of the legacy antivirus. Trend Micro, and don't get me wrong, I'm a reseller for Trend Micro, Kaspersky, Bitdefender, WebRoot, and I saw this problem several years ago and looked for a solution Now Sophos, I'm also a reseller for Sophos. In 2016, they came out with their first behavioral-based antivirus. And I'm glad to see somebody is on that. Now, the other thing that concerns me is the 33%, the 1/3 that say, hey, whatever our IT firm sold us is what we use. And I'm also glad to see that 0% said it doesn't matter, because it does matter. And that's
so Rick, let me ask.
Sure.
Sorry, Rick. Let me just ask you, since you're on that thought about a third, 33% say whatever our IT firm sold us. Do you have somewhere that certainly we can share with the audience after this session? Do you have questions that people should be asking their IT team or department when it comes to things like this?
I do, and I hope to kind of go through that a little bit on the next slide when I talk about the product that we typically recommend. But I also want to kind of help you to ask questions of your IT firm so that to give you kind of that ammunition that you can say, well, I need something better. Now, because antivirus is 25 years old, Gartner doesn't even do a review of antivirus anymore. They do a review of what's called endpoint protection. The endpoint protection that we recommend is SentinelOne, and because it covers these 3 different areas of an attack, especially a ransomware attack. The other protections, even Sophos, they stop with protection. And my second choice, if you don't go with SentinelOne, if you absolutely, don't feel that, I can discuss what the need is, but if you don't do SentinelOne, then I would recommend Sophos, because it at least is behavioral based. That's the question to ask your IT firm. Is the antivirus behavioral based, or is it strictly signature based? Getting back to the car makes and models of cars. Well, if you're just looking for makes and models and you've got all these new makes and models, it's really tough to tag the correct ones. But if I'm looking at how I'm driving the car, then I can make better judgments about who to stop, how to prevent that from doing damage. Now, the reason I like SentinelOne, and if you want more information, I've got the link there on the screen, our website /NoRansom, is three things really. That during an attack, it keeps track of everything that happens during the attack. Oftentimes it'll shut it down. But let's say it didn't. Let's say it's so new, it's so innovative that even SentinelOne doesn't recognize it. So it's a successful attack. Well, after we finally identify it, because we will, well, now we can go back, and SentinelOne gives rollback protection to any files that are changed. So we basically get back as quickly as possible. And it also gives you the forensics to see how it got in, whose computer did it get through, who clicked on the bad link, and we can find out how it got through the firewall and all these other things. And it gives you those full forensics that every other antivirus doesn't do. It stops with protection. The third reason is SentinelOne actually offers $1 million guarantee that you will not have to pay a ransom on your data. And there's no other company that I know of out there that offers a guarantee of any type, let alone up to $1 million. But the main thing to ask is it strictly signature based, or is it behavioral based?
So Rick, just full disclosure, you are also a reseller of SentinelOne, correct?
Absolutely. And like I said, I looked for several years prior to coming across SentinelOne, looking for that because I had the same, I would lay awake at night and go, oh my God, you know, if I just hope that I've got all my other layers set properly, that we don't have a ransomware attack, but I often worried about it. I worry less today.
So it seems that you've done, Rick, quite a bit of due diligence before you actually partnered as a reseller with SentinelOne. Sounds like there's a lot of due diligence done there.
There was, and I have there's other aspects that of these layers that I continue to do due diligence on, because the threat's ever changing. They're getting better every year. As you can tell, if you've gotten any phishing emails, you know, 5 years ago, you could discount those in a heartbeat because their English was so bad, you could recognize it, you know, and throw it out the window. Today, you really have to look. I got one today that I had to look at and try and figure it out.
So just a reminder, folks, sorry, Rick, just a reminder to everyone, bring in your questions. Glenda, you've got a question. We'll get to that. Thank you. But if you've got questions, I'm sure you're got all kinds of, I've already written a couple of questions myself. It's an amazing and very intriguing conversation. Just a reminder. Sorry, Rick, over to you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's say you get attacked and the ransomware is successful. What do? Because I've gotten this phone call more than once from poor businesses going, okay, I've got this ransom on the request on the computer. How do we get past it? It's really the lesser of two evils. Restore your last good backup, or pay the ransom and hope that the guys that you're paying it to will give you your data back. And I think an FBI study, and the percentages I've seen have varied, but I think the FBI study said 75% of the time you will get your data back. 25% of the time you will not. So this is kind of the last, what I feel is one of the most important processes that you need to go through is doing an assessment, a security assessment of your network, the vulnerabilities every year. This is, unless you ask your IT firm to do it, they will not do it. If they give you a blank stare and say, oh, we've never done one before, give us a call. We can help do that, but you can't manage risk that you know nothing about. And this identifies risk for you so that you can address it. The last thing I want to talk about, it's not one of the layers, but you should also talk to your insurance agent about cyber insurance. If you do not have it, you need to add it. And you need to understand from your insurance agent anything that is required to be in place for your insurance to pay off if you need to cover it. But with cyber insurance, you basically are pushing that risk to a third party. Now, I want to, Robert Hershevek has a Toronto-based company, and somebody asked him, well, how do these small businesses, you know, are they at risk? Is this a significant issue? His response was, look, if they're not monitoring the computer network, if you don't have a professional, an IT professional doing that, you're going to have great damage. And if you can't afford it, partner with somebody that can help you. So lastly, I want to talk about the three things. You have to do a vulnerability assessment to know where you are at so that you know what risk you have and how to address that risk. You need an action plan. You can't just say, yeah, we'll take care of it next year. You have to have an action plan and follow through on it, and it has to be ongoing risk management, right? All right, here's the checklist. It's 12 items. You can download it at secureerpinc.com/checklist. And it's real easy to do. You mark off the items that you have, and you circle the items that you don't have, and you work towards getting some additional protections in place to cover the items that you don't have. It's that easy. And in addition, you'll get the weekly cybersecurity tips that I send. And the very first one that you get will, I guarantee you, will protect you if you implement it for free. And I just want to throw this in real quick. We all have businesses, but we also have computers at home too, and we often worry about how to protect those devices. And here are some free tools that Sophos provides that will increase your protection on those home devices and personal devices. And with that, I wanted to give a teaser on the breach that's coming up in April. I'm doing a breach webinar with Phoenix Systems and wanted to point out just a couple of things. These are the world's biggest breaches, and I've circled Uber, which you heard about on the news. I circled Equifax, you heard all about on the news, and Anthem. The US people probably heard about it on the news. All these other ones that are even bigger did not make the news. So we'll discuss that more fully in the breaches. And this breach was just in the news today. January, it happened yesterday, and I saw it in the news this morning. So if you're a Bell Canada customer, I'm sorry.
Well, that's a great way to finish the conversation with a breaking news item. Well done. I love that. Bell Canada customers, Rick's sorry. He's sorry that you're Bell Canada customers, it sounds like. Hey, Rick, that has been very enlightening, very eye-opening. I've got a few questions I wanted to ask, but I want to get back to a couple of questions from our audience. Glenda was asking, you had a slide there, Rick, about there's a point number 3 on your slide that says I think it was about antivirus, if I'm not mistaken, using non-Windows / Microsoft. And she's saying if you are running other types, are you less vulnerable?
By other types, I assume she means other types of operating systems. So,
Glenn, if you want to, Glenn, if you want to type in just as we're speaking, just so we're covering your question in the most perfect way we can. But I think it's back to that slide, Rick, where you were talking about antiviruses, and point 3 you mentioned using non-window Microsoft, and she's saying, hey, if you're running other types, and I would think other types of perhaps non-window Microsoft software, right. Are you less vulnerable?
It was back to the backup and one of my list of backups for business continuity.
Yeah, so Glenda here says, Glenda says if you have custom operating systems.
Well, the custom operating system is probably written in something. You're less of a target just because from the standpoint that the criminals have to write to the vulnerabilities of the operating system. Now, if the operating system, even if it's custom, if it acts like a Windows-based file server or file with directories and so forth, the ransomware could still infect that and encrypt it and hold it for ransom. One of the questions I often get is, well, everybody in our office is on Macs. We're safe. We've got an Apple throughout. Macs aren't targeted. They are being targeted. They are, because of the Apple smartphones are so pervasive now, the criminals have figured out that Apple is a worthy target now, and they are focusing on it. So you can't simply discount, oh, if I have Macs, we're safe. You are not safe. That's sticking your head in the sand and assuming that the criminals aren't going to target you.
Okay, I want to get back to that if I have an opportunity, because I just had that conversation with one of my colleagues yesterday, mentioning this this video webinar session today. So I'll get back if I have a chance. But so Glenda, hopefully we have certainly Rick has answered your question. So thank you for providing that. I want to go to Peter. Peter has a question. He says, "Will the slides be made available?" Absolutely, Peter, as part of the follow-up communication Phoenix Systems is going to provide to you. The slides from Rick will be provided in a PDF, plus that checklist in case you weren't able to jot down that URL that Rick was providing, and then we'll provide a link to his to the opportunity for you to join his email list, because I've joined, and yeah, Rick's got some really insightful stuff that he shares. So we'll make sure those links are part of the communications that Rick has suggested to you. Just want to get to Ronald. Ronald saying, okay, so I'm trying to read this here. Some newer routers have built-in AV. Have you, Rick, evaluated them? If you use one of these, do you still need AV on each computer in the network? A great question, Ronald. Thank you. Rick.
A firewall can have various types of protections built into it. And again, you know, it's great that we're doing this in January. If you go outside and you put on a windbreaker and it's freezing cold outside, yes, you have a layer of protection on, but would you be warmer if you put on 2 or 3 different layers? We all hear that. And so obviously the more layers you can put on, the better protected you are. So even though your firewall may have antivirus built into it, which some of the better ones do now, and I recommend a business class firewall. We'll talk about firewalls more during the breach presentation because that's one of the significant layers for breaches. But to stop there and say, well, I don't really need a good antivirus on the endpoints because I've got a good firewall, you're simply exposing yourself when you really don't need to.
Okay, great. And Ronald, thank you for that question. Hope we've answered that for you. Larry's got a question, and it's this is good that Larry's asking this, because this goes back to the conversation that I wanted to have with you regarding the Apple devices. He's now saying more of us are using our iPhones for business email, as am I. How safe are we, Rick, with these devices?
Well, you know, back in December, I was speaking at either a podcast or speaking within a small group, and they said, well, what do you expect in 2018? I really expect this year to be, for mobile devices, to be targeted much more from not necessarily from a ransomware point of view, but from a breach or being hacked point of view. And because you're holding in your hand what 15 years ago was a little mini computer. We're actually accessing ERP systems directly from mobile applications. So the risk is increasing, and I typically recommend to clients that have concerns over it, make sure your device, if you're receiving email, make sure you have a password lock on it. Require your employees to have a password lock on it. Have employees sign an acceptable use policy, which outlines your business use of your personal phone. If it's a business phone that the business has bought, then make sure your employees know, hey, if you lose this phone, we are going to wipe the entire device. You better have a backup of any photos and personal items you have on it. Now there are applications that can, through mobile device management, put basically a secure bubble around the business information. And if that device is lost or that employee leaves or is disgruntled, you can basically wipe just the business data on it without killing the entire device.
Very good, folks. And so, Larry, thank you for that question. Larry, I hope we answered that question for you. Got just one quick question, and before I ask, reaching out again to the folks in our audience, if you've got any further questions that you have for Rick, this is the perfect time. This is, as Rick has said a few times, very topical, very timely in the new year for us to chit chat about. Now, I want to go back to your comment, Rick. You talked about security audit and doing a security audit. From your experience, what are some of the things that the audience should think about or be asking about when it comes to the security audit in terms of the next steps? If someone is watching this saying, oh gosh, we've never done a security audit, what does that mean? How does that look? What does that look like? And what are some of the questions I need to be asking? Can you just briefly fill in on that? And
Sure.
Again, folks, if you've got any questions, please send them in, and we'll answer them as best as we can.
Now there are different security audits. Some are labor intensive, and some are more automated. The ones we do are probably about 60-40 automated, because we do an automated scan of the network to look for vulnerabilities, on the servers and on devices and so forth. So that's automated. Now, the trade-off on that is that it's relatively inexpensive. We do a vulnerability assessment for $1,500. That also includes a dark web scan. I can explain that later if somebody wants to know what that is. But now I just met with a company that I'm looking at for security, and they indicated that they have a 3 to 4 day on-site risk review that includes penetration testing, which is labor intensive. That's a person trying to break into your network. Theirs runs about $10,000. So, when he said that, I said, okay, you're actually you're on site. He goes, absolutely. We're on site 3 to 4 days, and we've got a hacker that's trying to break in to your network. And I said, well, is that really reasonable for a 2 or 3 person firm? He said, it is what it is. It's a very thorough assessment, and you take it as such.
Okay, thanks. Just looking to see, we don't have any further questions, and we're good for time here, Rick. I wanted to ask you one last one. And the question really is, we just don't have the money for all these layers that you were speaking around. What should an organization or an individual do in that situation?
Then you need to educate yourself. Work with somebody. If you have an internal IT person, task them with getting training. So that they are more proactive. They can look for different types of solutions that are not very expensive. Train your employees. That is not very expensive. The better educated that your staff and your whole company is, the better you're going to address and sidestep the landmines, because you'll recognize them when you see them. And if you don't have the money, spend it in your backups. Make sure that you try to go for a business continuity type solution as much as you can. That is your last saving grace, is your backup.
Okay, last saving grace is your backup, folks. So Rick Rusch, thank you for participating in our Let's Talk ERP video webinar series. I've got a couple of closing remarks and some action items for the folks out there who are with us. So a couple of things. We will be sending out a follow-up communication, not only with a recording of this particular video call, but we'll also provide links to Rick's that free sheet, and also a link to his email sign up for the newsletter that Rick was referring to. And also, we would love for everyone to share your thoughts. When you get our communication, please respond back and just share your thoughts. We'd like to start building sort of a portfolio of testimonials or portfolio of feedback from our audience, and that it really helps us in terms of evolving this Let's Talk ERP video webinar series that we just started in the very latter part of 2017. So I think we're hitting the ground off really well in 2018 with people like Rick coming online with us. Rick also alluded to the fact that he's back with us. We're very delighted to have him back, and his session is going to be on the 18th of April of this year. All you got to do is go to letstalkerp.ca, and you go to the page where it talks about speakers and registration, and you can go and register for his session that he talked about. Folks, if you're on LinkedIn, please follow our LinkedIn company page. And if you're on Twitter, follow us on Twitter at PHO, P-H-O Systems. We're there. And certainly if you want to continue the conversation with Rick, his contact information, he's been so open to provide us with that. So please continue that conversation, because this is what it's all about. It's all about conversations. That's the whole idea of Let's Talk ERP video webinar series. It's really starting conversations. So
and Jeff,
Rick, you've got...
say one last thing. Don't keep this a secret. Come invite other people to the breach session. Have people watch this video. Don't keep us a secret.
I guess I'm gonna have to buy you a coffee or a beer or something like that, Rick. Look at you trying to outshine me. I love it. I love when guests start outshining everyone. It's great. No, absolutely. You know, Rick, we are going to share some stuff that Rick has, certainly through our LinkedIn communications and keeping the conversation going. So I want to thank Rick for the opportunity, and certainly folks, go to that April 18th session. Is there any last minute pointer that you want to mention, Rick, before we sign off for the day?
I'm on LinkedIn. They can follow me on LinkedIn, follow our company, go to our company website. We have different ways to follow us. I am, Javid can probably attest, I am constantly making my opinions known on LinkedIn. That's one of my favorite sites to be on. But if you have a question, don't, if you want to ask an honest opinion, you email me and I will give you my honest opinion. No BS. You know, I'm not here to sell. I'm here to educate. And that I find out products that are the best that I find out there, I will tell you. If I don't find products out there, if I have concerns, which I still do on some things, I will tell you. I always want to be an honest conversation. I am who I am, and take me as I am.
Thank you, and certainly we will take you as you are, Rick. You're a great guy. Thank you for all the insight, education that you provide. You're right. You're quite active on LinkedIn and the LinkedIn community. Certainly go and check him out and connect with him. And Rick, thank you again, folks. Thank you for your time. It's been a very pleasure. And signing off to you, Rick, and signing off to the folks. We will see you next time on Let's Talk ERP.